As of this morning, 9,100 subscribers. We're inching closer and closer to 10,000 subscribers. Huge milestone, Amir. We're going to hit here pretty soon, but I'm going to address the elephant in the room. We have cameras on, and of course, that is my fault more so than my co host, but we are finally here, finally on camera. Of course, we're trying to take this podcast to the next level, and hopefully, this is one way we can connect with you guys and do that on the road to these next big milestones. But today, of course, Amir joining us, longtime co-host of the show. And today we thought it would be good. Going into week 18, a lot of playoff hopes and teams' futures are on the line going forward this upcoming weekend. So we're going to go through a better half of the league as far as NFL head coaches. And we're going to say, hey, if we were the GM, would we extend them for multiple years? Would we fire them? Or would we give them one last chance? But Amir, how you doing today on this Thursday morning?
I'm doing great. Having cameras on, it's new year. Time to take this podcast to a whole nother level. Let's go.
Absolutely. Let's get into it. Let's not waste any time. Of course, we're going to start here with Mike Tomlin, and he draws a lot of questions because he is consistently. It's a part of his, I guess, identity to never have a below 500 season. Year in and year out, this man just wins and wins and wins, or he at least wins more than he loses. This year, he's 9-7, and of course, this record here you see on the middle of your screen. He's 172, 102 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So when we get into more experienced coaches like Sean Payton and Bill Belichick later on, this is just the record with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hopefully that makes sense. But, I mean, Mike Tomlin's winning 63% of his games. Amir, why are you going to give him at least one more year, though? Because, again, it's another year where this team just isn't bad enough to tank, but they're not good enough to contend.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm seeing the games that they won throughout the year. They beat the Browns, which are obviously contenders. They beat the Ravens, that are also contenders. And so, when I'm looking at this team and seeing them led by Mike Tomlin, the past few years, I'm thinking, how is he even getting this team in playoff contention? And I think the hardest thing to do, as a GM, is to find a great coach. You can always draft, you can always purposely tank, you can always make trades, but finding a good coach is key. I think it'll be harder for them to go ahead and get rid of Mike Tomlin and to find somebody else rather than, just give him another year, hopefully draft better or try to make some trades, end up getting a potential quarterback or, trade it for somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. I think, it's to the point where you give him one more year. I respect Mike Tomlin. I think for the job that he's done with the talent he's had, he's definitely a top 5 coach here in the NFL. However, it comes to a point where in a franchise, if you're just, it's like that Drake lyric, it's like you're running on a treadmill, you're running, but you ain't going nowhere. I hate to bring that to the show, but it's really, that's what the Pittsburgh Steelers are in right now. They're in limbo. They're just in purgatory where they're good every single year, but they're not good enough, but they're not bad enough to get those much needed, I guess, generational prospects of talents in the NFL draft that go typically in the top 10 picks. So they're kind of just in that 11 to 16 range each and every year where they're not competing, but they're not tanking. And it's just kind of, you need to pick a direction here in the NFL, especially because so many teams have changed their trajectory over these last couple of years, and the Steelers are still the Steelers. But any last thoughts here? It looks like we're both going to give them one more year before we probably make a decision.
Yeah, one more year.
One more year for Mike Tomlin, but we get to Bill Belichick, and this is going to be the only cheating part of the podcast for me, and I'll explain. I talked about it on Tuesday with the New Year's resolutions, as we had somebody swipe up on one of my stories. Of course, every year I have you guys get involved in certain podcasts, and somebody wanted me to talk about the New England Patriots and their future. Of course, to me, I ended up talking about this and going into a deep dive on Tuesday, and basically what I came down to was this. It's Bill Belichick. Tom Brady's great. Of course, probably the greatest football player of all time. Probably not probably. It's a definite at this point. The GOAT. But you also might have the greatest coach of all time in Bill Belichick. Regardless, that duo was so great together. And it's not often you see a duo go to 8 Super Bowls and win 6 of them in a short amount of time. So to me, Bill Belichick, I think for how much he's done for this franchise, I'm going to leave it up to him. If he comes to me, and if I'm Robert Kraft and he comes up to me and says, I feel like I want to chase another Super Bowl to tie Tom Brady, to get back at him, is a good way to put it. And I want to go elsewhere. I think my chances are better with the Chargers or the Commanders, whoever he wants to go to. then I'm okay with him leaving. However, I'm never going to fire him for the simple fact of what he means and what he's done for this franchise. But Amir, looks like you're going to extend him. And for those at home, extend means at least 2 more years on his contract. Amir, why are you going to extend Bill Belichick?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Robert Kraft, I'm looking at Bill Belichick. I'm looking at everything he's accomplished. I mean, if I'm him, I'm showing respect to him and I'm keeping him. And I mean, just 2 years ago, it got to a point in the season where we were talking about the Patriots being contenders with a young Mac
Yes,
Jones.
a
And
rookie.
I think, now, they're in a spot to, grab a quarterback, develop them, and make some use of them. I mean, because if they're gonna, somewhat be able to compete with, Mac Jones, when he first came into the league, I mean, shoot, Penix is better than him in my opinion. Caleb Williams is better than him, even though he won't fall that far. But
That's
you
interesting.
know, that's honestly my opinion. And so this Patriots team, I mean, I say give him 2 more years at least. Let him kind of see what he can work with in this draft, and pretty much go from there.
I mean, again, even though he's 4-12 this year, and I think he's 29-38 without Tom Brady. Again, it's just like we mentioned, it comes down to what he's done for this franchise in its totality. But I mean, even with these couple bad seasons, he's still winning 69-70% of his games. It's unheard of, and honestly,
Yeah.
might be the greatest head coach of all time. But then we move over to Mike McCarthy, and this one's interesting. And I want to preface this by saying at home, again, it comes down to you got to think of the fan base, you got to think of their history. And of course, we did go into this with the mindset of, okay, if we were the GM and Mike McCarthy, would we keep him? Would we fire him? Extend him? To me, I came down to it's the Dallas culture, and I am going to fire him for the simple fact that Dallas, year in and year out, they have the roster, but they haven't been able to get over the hump, whether if it's poor playoff performances by the players or bad head coaching or a combination of both. I think it's getting to the point with Mike McCarthy, even though he's winning 62% of his games. You need a change if they can't eventually win that big time game or win a couple big time games. So to me, if Dallas goes into the playoffs this year and they fall in the first or second round yet again, I'm gonna make a change and I'm gonna have Dan Quinn take over instead of Mike McCarthy. But your thoughts here, Amir, about the Packers legend of a head coach?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on some great, points because, I'm looking at this Dallas team year in and year out. I mean, these are some Super Bowl talented rosters. I mean, like there's no reason why if you look at this roster, you should not be saying, this team should be toe to toe with the Niners and the Ravens. I mean, you got Dak Prescott who's playing on the MVP level in his prime. I mean, you have an absolutely loaded defense, loaded receiving core. You keep on falling short, year in and year out. And I'm starting to think like, imagine if a guy like Mike Tomlin or Bill Belichick had this type of roster. I
Right.
mean, these dudes would be obvious contenders. I'm looking at Mike McCarthy, and I'm looking at this team as a whole, what they've done the past few years, and it's a famous saying that says "change or die." And I think if he gets bounced out the first round, if they go on the road and end up, getting smacked, or even at home end up getting smacked up, I say you need to fire him and find something new.
Absolutely. I agree exactly what we just all mentioned. But Arthur Smith, I will mention this about Mike McCarthy. There's no doubt to me he's going to find another job. Again, it just might not be with Dallas. For Arthur Smith, though, you're going to fire him. I'm going to exterminate him from the league. I think, I think The Rock just opened up that UFL. They combined with the USFL and his
Yeah,
XFL. They combined. I think he'd be a prime head coach over there. Because to me, it does not make sense how this guy coaches a football team. You draft Kyle Pitts, arguably the greatest prospect at the tight end position of all time. I don't even think it was in question, just because of
exactly.
it's modern medicine and of course bodies get bigger and better than ever. You draft him eighth over or fourth overall, excuse me, and then you don't even use him. You use him as a decoy. You drafted a top four pick to use him as a decoy. Again, this is not a fourth, fifth, sixth round tight end. This is a first four pick or in the NFL draft. Tight ends don't ever go that early. I don't know if a tight end's ever gone that early. And you just refuse to use him to his capabilities. Again, this is a guy that should be a Hall of Fame level player. And now people he's kind of just an afterthought. And then it gets worse. Then 2 years later, you draft Bijan Robinson, top 8. And again, running backs do not go in the first round anymore. And if they do, it's always 29, 30, 31, 32. It's never in the top 10 picks. This year, Arthur Smith goes out there and drafts a generational prospect in Bijan Robinson. And again, it's another player where he underutilizes. Why is Tyler Algier splitting this backfield? I get he had a good year last year, and
Mhm.
Tyler Algier will be a solid back for his career, but he's not Bijan Robinson, right? Why is Jonnu Smith, a veteran? I know he had time with Arthur Smith in Tennessee. Why is he splitting touches with Kyle Pitts? It does not make sense to me. And for the pure frustration of how these players are being utilized, I'm going to exterminate him. And I think Dwayne the Rock Johnson is going to be giving him a phone call.
Yeah, listen, I'm firing them too, and this Falcons team is only 7-9 because of the talent they have around them. I mean, shoot, if you go ahead and fire Arthur Smith and even get a game manager quarterback, I mean, this team is a legit team, and I
Yes.
mean, this team has lost games because Arthur Smith is refusing to give his top players touches, to put them in the offense. Just like you just said, Kyle Pitts. I mean, in my lifetime, I've never seen a tight end prospect that great.
Go
I mean,
Gators,
the
by the
dude
way.
came into the league in the top 5, and you draft Bijan in the top 10 as a running back. You don't even use them. I don't know what he's thinking. What his mantra is. I don't know if he's trying to preserve his players, or it's some bias that's going on, or what it is. But he needs to be fired.
I think this is a sleeper team for Ben Johnson, and I think it's a perfect team for Ben Johnson if they do move off of Arthur Smith. There's a lot of good teams around there, but Arthur Smith, with the offensive mind that he has for Detroit, I think give him an offense with Drake London, who's been underutilized, even though I'm not the biggest Drake London fan. And then you can also give him Bijan, Tyler Algier. Of course, he's a solid secondary back. And Kyle Pitts, I think, Atlanta with this defense might be scary next year. However, though, I think the rumors right now are saying that Atlanta's going to hold on to Arthur Smith for another year. I just think that's a catastrophic mistake. He could be one of those
Yeah.
coaches that get fired next year, mid-season. But then we talk about a division foe, Dennis Allen. He has his team at 8-8. Of course, 15-18 in his 2 seasons with the New Orleans Saints. He was the heir to Sean Payton after he took a step away from the game of football. And Dennis Allen's right there with me with with Arthur Smith. I'm just not a big fan. I was never a fan, even back when he was with Oakland in 2013 or so. I'm just not a big fan of Dennis Allen and how he, operates offensively, defensively. And like you mentioned for Atlanta, the talent on this roster is pulling this team to an 8-8 record more so than the coaching staff. So I'm going to fire Dennis Allen as well. But any additional thoughts about DA?
Get him out of here. That's
I
it.
mean,
That team is just just mid. I mean, there's no reason why they should be 8-8. Fighting for the division. I mean, they're always loaded on defense. That defense is always there. And they're pretty much just wasting use of the prime years of guys on this roster.
absolutely. I'll let you dive into this one here. Robert Saleh, Saleh, however you want to say it. Of course, defensive coordinator for the Niners a couple years back when they went to the Super Bowl. He ended up coming over to the Jets, and I think it's a very interesting case because again, in his 2 or 3 years, whatever it's been, he's 17-33. I think 3 years, and again, only winning 34% of the games is not ideal. And I think any other coach, you're looking at him like he's on the hot seat. He's probably getting fired after this year, especially after a 6-10 performance. But I think with the New York media just being so harsh on Zach Wilson, granted he didn't live up to expectations. I think we're kind of giving him a pass for those first 2 years, and then he gets Aaron Rodgers. Okay, it's time to show Robert Saleh, and they've underperformed it again due to injury. But Amir, your thoughts here about Robert Saleh, and why would you extend him despite the mediocre years here for New York?
Yeah, man. I would keep him for a few reasons. Saleh is probably arguably my favorite coach in the league, and
Wow.
he's a great defensive minded coach. Somebody who came into New York, already brought a wonderful culture and gained the favor of his players. And I think with him, this team should not be 6-10. I mean, they've won some amazing games where the defense willed them up. And, it was great coaching that got them through. And I mean, if they have Aaron Rodgers, who right now, I personally think he's still a top 5 quarterback in the league.
I
If you get
agree.
him, I mean, this is a playoff contention team. And, it's obviously proof to that. I mean, Garrett Wilson has 1,000 yards receiving. Amidst all the troubles going on at receiver. I mean, you go ahead and get Aaron Rodgers, top receiving prospect, Alan Lazard over here too as well. You got Brees Hall there too, who's also playing decent these past couple of weeks. I mean, this team, is 6-10. And you add a quarterback with them, I mean, this team's going to be dangerous.
I agree, and I think after next year, if they underperform, I think it definitely is going to have some questions, right? But I think when you get Aaron
Mhm.
Rodgers back, it's going to be extremely hard to do that. Like you mentioned, with this overall, how talented this roster is. But again, another disappointing year for Robert Saleh. But then we move over to the NFC East. And I'll let you dive into this one because, of course, you didn't even have exterminate, fire. You had something else. Why do you have what you have here for Ron Rivera as he's a 26, 39, and 1 in his time with the Washington football team, Commanders, and whatever else they were called in that time span. But Abir, go ahead.
Yeah, it is time for them to move on to something else. I mean, this team has been, you know, depleting year by year. It's time to delete him out of there, start fresh, rebuild. And, I was talking to you about this the other day. This Washington team, went into the season not knowing if they were going to tank or win.
Right.
And they wait until the trade deadline to make these trades and end up losing out. When in reality, I mean, they won 4 games that they could have easily just tanked. I mean, like, there's no reason why this team should not be without a doubt grabbing Caleb Williams, grabbing, this top pick to pick up a quarterback, but instead they decided to go ahead and wait till the trade deadline to trade away Chase Young and Montez Sweat. And, it's just too much going on. They got to start fresh and brand new.
Yeah, I think we talked about it too on the party the other day. Of course, Chances, shout out to him. He's a big Washington fan, but we talked about it just simply, is Sam Howell the guy? To me, obviously, we've talked about it on the pod before that first off, they need to get him some protection before they can even make a judgment on Sam Howell. However, right now, and we'll talk about it later, they have the number 2 overall pick. And right now, that's the highest they can get because the Bears have it number 1 locked up. So at number 2, let's say the Bears trade with the team and they get Caleb Williams, or it could be Washington. Washington is the number 2 pick. They can easily trade the number 2 and some future first to get Caleb Williams, or they can just wait for Drake May. Whatever route they go, I think it's definitely in need of a reset. And I mean, I'll ask you this: is Eric Bieniemy the guy, or would you, say the field is a better option for this team going forward?
Honestly, no, I'm not really sure. I mean, in my opinion, I think no coach is going to be able to even, compete with this roster.
Right.
I think what they need to do is, once they go ahead and grab a quarterback, they have to get him protection. That's number one. Sam Howell was by far the most sacked quarterback, in the league, and the worst thing you want to do is draft a quarterback and bring him in, and ruin his confidence immediately if you end up starting him right away.
Right.
By having a terrible offensive line around him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll set up a good competition for both Sam Howell and whoever they do decide to draft, if that is the direction they go. But fire and delete from both of us. Then we talk about Mike Vrabel, a guy who's 55% of the time he's winning his games there in Tennessee. He's 5-11 this year, and last year was a disappointing season as well. After they started hot and then they plummeted second half of last year as well. This year, I guess the biggest thing from Tennessee is that maybe they found their quarterback going forward, as Will Levis has shown a lot of flashes. But I mean, overall, this team has definitely taken a step back identity wise, where we know this year, every single year, it's been Derrick Henry and get out the way. Derrick
Mhm.
Henry's kind of taken a step back, and whether if that be by design or just overall his body, eventually, the workload that he's had in his career taking a toll on him, whatever the case may be, I think this year was definitely a bit of a slap in the face, and I think they definitely need to go into this offseason aggressively in whatever direction that is, whether if they want to commit to a tank or they want to, make some big trades and maybe get back in the running. I think this needs to be an aggressive offseason for Tennessee. And for that reason, I'm going to give him one more year. I do believe in Mike Vrabel as the head coach.
Yeah, me as well. I believe in Mike Vrabel, and I think that the Titans are kind of relieved a little bit, realizing maybe we might have our guy. We can go into this offseason, figure some things out offensively and defensively, and it's actually great you say that. It's weird because the Titans have their mantra, when they're in playoff contention was run the football, stop the run. That's pretty much washed away because Derrick Henry's probably gone after this year.
You think so?
It's pretty much solidified. So I think it'll help them kind of go into this offseason, realizing that, all right, we're going to change some stuff up, schematically, and we're going to build around Will Levis in a better way.
I think that'd be an interesting offseason. Derrick Henry seems like one of those four lifers for me. But if they do decide to trade him, let's say to a Philly, just hypothetically, let's say they get a second round pick out of Derrick Henry. I think going forward with this pass heavy offense, maybe you bring DeAndre Hopkins back. I think that's definitely an interesting offense there with Will Levis, and it could turn it just to a fun, high powered passing offense. But then we talk
Mhm.
about New York. We talked about Robert Saleh earlier. Of course, we're not getting rid of him, so we're keeping some stability there in one part of New York. But then we go to their partner, their neighbor in the New York Giants and Brian Daboll. Last year, he had this team at like 10-6. They make the playoffs, and not only do they make the playoffs, they beat one of the highest powered offenses in the first round of the playoffs and pretty handily too. I mean, they took care of that Minnesota Viking offense. And so basically, in Brian Daboll's first year, coach of the year, he won a playoff game for this Giants team, and he ended a 13-year streak where they didn't even make the playoffs. Brian Daboll definitely got off to a good start. But then this year, they extend Daniel Jones, and nothing has gone right. They're the complete opposite of last year at this time. And I guess I want to ask you this: do you believe that the first year was just beginner's luck, or I guess just a first year fluke, or do you think? I guess I'll ask you, which side of this Giants team do you believe in more? Do you believe in the first year or the rendition we're seeing right now?
I believe in what we're seeing right now, and I personally believe Dable is a good coach, but the biggest problem that they made was extending Daniel Jones.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, he showed promise last year, but I mean, it took him a long time to get up to that point. I mean, we were seeing him, absolutely, play horrible and horrendous up to that point. And, I think what they did was, their biggest problem was looking at that team, looking at what they did last year, expecting the same exact result. I mean, you should have known, the O line is already bad. You should have known, Daniel Jones has struggled in the past, and he probably won't get much better than what he's shown up to that point.
Right.
I think that was our biggest problem, kind of being too complacent and too comfortable with building the offense around him.
I think they were kind of, pigeonholed where it's like, if we don't bring Daniel Jones back, we're going to let a quarterback that just led us to a playoff win go. But again, I think, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, they definitely overpaid for him. But again, one more year, kind of okay, you were good. Now you were terrible. Who are you really, for this football team? And I think we'll see that next year. And hopefully the team is healthy. But I think Saquon could also be on the move, even though, there's he just got a contract. But then we talk about the Buffalo Bills, and I think again, this is just like a Mike McCarthy case. You have to take into account their roster and their expectations. And again, for Mike McCarthy in Dallas, they have the roster. They're winning a lot of regular season games, but when it comes down to the playoffs, what matters most, they're coming up short. And you can say the same thing about Sean McDermott here, with arguably some would say the best quarterback in the NFL, and Josh Allen. I wouldn't say that. However, they're 10-6. They're getting hot at the right time here in real life. And overall, it's like, how do you fire a coach that's won 63% of the games? But again, like I mentioned, it's their roster and their expectations. And I think just like Mike McCarthy, if this team can't get it done this year, at least make it to the AFC title game. I don't think they should bring Sean McDermott back. You got to get a fresh mind in there, a fresh face to maybe or hopefully take this team over the top. But Amir, your thoughts here about Sean McDermott?
Yeah, I said fire because I compare this team to Dallas, just like you just mentioned. I mean, this team has had some Super Bowl caliber rosters, especially last year. Like, there's no
Yes.
reason why last year, they have not shouldn't have beat Kansas City. Went to the Super Bowl, in my honest opinion. And Josh Allen, who's a top five, the top three quarterback, based off of your opinion. I mean, you are wasting his prime years. He's obviously struggling somewhere. And I think it has to do something with the coaching, because there's no way he takes a huge step back. And, you got Stephon Diggs, who's the top receiver in the league and not getting touches in the second half of the season. And I think if this team doesn't go far, you got to start new. You have to.
Moving over to Zach Taylor, and we're going to fly through the remaining of these coaches here because we have a lot more to get into. But Zach Taylor, to me, I'm going to give him one more year. Of course, each and every year with Joe Burrow, when Joe Burrow's healthy, this team is good. And of course, you need a quarterback to win at the highest level. So for that reason, and for the fact that he has his team at 500 right now, I'm going to give him one more year, even though overall, I'm not the biggest Zach Taylor fanatic. But Amir, your thoughts on Zach Taylor?
Yeah, I say extend him. I mean, he obviously took his team to the Super Bowl, with Joe Burrow. He's shown what he's capable of doing when his quarterback is healthy in there. I personally thought he's handled the season well. After Burrow got hurt. Once he got hurt, you obviously had somebody that you were preparing, just in case, to step in and kind of, take up that role. And so I say extend him.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to argue too much there with Zach Taylor. But then we talk about Sean Payton, a guy that has been drama filled. And this is a prime example of the 8-8. Of course, he was with New Orleans, won a Super Bowl. And Drew Brees, of course, became one of my favorite players. But Sean Payton, he's just been drama filled this year, whether if it was slandering Nathaniel Hackett or whether if it's now slandering Russell Wilson. This guy just cannot stay out of the media for the wrong reasons. And I think this team is getting more attention off the field than on the field. But regardless, I think, for how this team rebounded this year, I'm going to give him one more year.
Yeah, for me, I say one more year. I thought, this team started off too slow. And eventually they picked it up, especially defensively. That was kind of their mantra. But I think with Sean Payton, I'm saying one more year because, I feel like he's kind of growing tension within this team. Just like you just mentioned, bringing in too much media attention, bringing in problems. You drive out your starting quarterback, which
Right.
I believe they should have kept Russ. In my opinion, I think Sean Payton, and his management was kind of finding somebody to scapegoat, finding somebody to point fingers to. And I think that's a big problem that'll eventually take a toll on this team. So I'm saying one more year.
Then we talk about Matt Eberflus and 7-9 this year, and this team is again
Who?
getting hot at the right time. A 10-23 record with this team, atrocious record. But this team is of course in the media because they have the number one pick via the Carolina Panthers, and they have a big decision coming up this offseason. So that is why I have the asterisks here because in the normal case I would fire him. I'm only going to say fire, though, if they can get Ben Johnson, because if not, if they're going to retain Justin Fields, there's already some chemistry there. So I would just say hold on to Matt Eberflus for one more year. But if they're going to go with Caleb Williams or go with another quarterback, I think you got to fire Matt Eberflus. But your thoughts here?
Yeah, I say fire. We're obviously seeing Justin Fields play better. Seeing his ability. Being, just like, you know, any other team that's kind of, just struggling at quarterback. I feel like Justin Fields needs a new face. He needs somebody fresh. I believe he kind of just got thrown into a bad situation, and on top of the lack of coaching, I think it's making it hard on him. Especially if they go ahead and grab a new quarterback. You obviously saw it didn't work with Fields, so you might as well start fresh, get somebody new, and build from there.
I agree. Then we talk about John Gannon, a guy who's 4-12 first year as a head coach. And again, it's not pretty what this record is. However, he's got three of these wins with Kyler Murray at the quarterback position. So again, when you don't have your star quarterback, it's hard to win here in the NFL. However, John Gannon, to me, it's the first year. He didn't have his star quarterback for the first 11 games of the season or whatever the case was. I think he definitely deserves at least one more year. But I think next year, if he gets off to a slow start, it might be a little tricky there. But your thoughts here about John Gannon?
Yeah, I'll say give him one more year. It's not much you can really do when literally your quarterback is hurt. That's what you just said. And once Kyler Murray got back, we've seen this team be competitive. They
Yes.
went toe to toe with the Eagles, and other teams like that. And I say just don't just go ahead and just kick him quick. Go ahead and wait, see what you can do. If you move off from Kyler Murray or keep him, give him one more year.
I think people were calling me crazy when I was saying this man is a top 5 or top 15 quarterback here in the NFL. And I stick to it. I still think he's a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. And again, they just need a full year together to compete for a playoff spot. Then we talk about Matt LaFleur. And let me explain this one because you're going to look at this like, oh, and this is stupid. I'm going to click off the video. There's no way you're even questioning this. However, I wanted to bring this and I really wanted to see your opinion on it. And of course, we agree. But this is a guy that was with Aaron Rodgers, and he came into a situation that was very generous. He came into a very good situation again with a Hall of Fame level quarterback, a guy who won 2 straight MVPs. So I wanted to ask you, do you think this is a guy that he's 8-8 this year? The Packers, of course, have seen flashes of Jordan Love's greatness, and it looks like he's that next great Packer quarterback. But do you think Matt LaFleur is going to be the guy to, take Jordan Love to that next level? Because if not, you might as well get rid of him. And again, I guess it comes down to, do you believe Matt LaFleur was an Aaron Rodgers merchant? Your thoughts here about Matt LaFleur and his future with the Green Bay Packers?
Well, I'm not gonna, knock Matt LaFleur for coming into a great situation. I can go ahead and use the same logic for Bill Belichick when people look at Bill Belichick's record after Tom Brady left.
Yeah.
I think, you know, amidst all the injuries that's happened this season, they're still 8-8 and spot for playoff contention, which is great, great to me. And Jordan Love, being around the team where there's chaos happening. You got receivers hurt week to week. You got your defense completely banged up. Hurt pretty much every single week. We haven't seen this team play at full strength in a while. And the fact that they're still 8-8, and we've seen them play really, really good. I think they can go from there, build from this momentum, give him more time, and don't just go ahead and just make it uncomfortable for Jordan Love. Because I mean this is his first year starting, so why not just keep this going? See if he develops from there.
Absolutely. Then we're going to finish off here with some guys that took over mid-season. Antonio Pierce, will start with him. He's 4-4 this year. Of course, 500 record. Of course, and to me, I think I'm going to give him one more year as the head coach because we don't usually see these interim head coaches, even if they have success. We don't usually see these guys get another year. But for Antonio Pierce, for how he's changed the culture here, it seems like Devontae Adams went from a place of I don't want to be here to it's okay now. For that simple fact, I'm going to give Antonio Pierce at least one more year here as the starting head coach.
Yeah, I say give him one more year. I wouldn't say extend because I mean this team has had problems, and right now you're not 100% sure if he was a part of that. Based off of his coaching, and so I say give him one more year, see what he does, and don't jump the gun and get ready to fire him. And especially because I mean the whole fan base, the entire culture of the team is behind him and playing
Yes,
for him, which is also helping.
absolutely. Then we're going to finish off with these two, and I think we can make these quick. Jeff Smith, a guy who took over for Brandon Staley. He's won 0 games. Very quickly, I'm going to fire this guy. They need a fresh face there in Los Angeles, whether if it's Bill Belichick, Ben Johnson, or another guy.
Yeah, start fresh, start brand new. Don't waste just in Herbert's prime years.
Yeah, you need a guy that can really fix that defense for one, but then two, help keep Herbert at that top 5 level. And then Chris Tabor, another guy who took over. He's 1-4 in this span. I guess we'll give him his credit. He got their first win on the season. So shout out to Chris Tabor. However, again, it's another one of those situations where you need to start fresh. You really need to get that guy for Bryce Young to take that next step. But any additional thoughts here about Chris Tabor?
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad for Chris Tabor, being a part of this his franchise, all the stuff that's happening. But I say you got to start fresh. You have to bring Bryce Young into a better situation, and go from there.
Moving over here into our Week 18 preview, and very quickly on your screen, you see our Week 17 top 10. This is from last Thursday's video. Of course, you see Amir's 6 through 10 on the right side. I am on the left. And of course, this is our top 5. Very similar. We have the same teams, just shuffling some spots. Now, from my list going forward, and I won't spoil yours, Amir, but if you want to chime in, you can. I didn't have anybody fall out of my list. I have the same top 10 teams, which is, I would say, is expected at this point in the year. But right outside, we have the Packers who are getting hot. Jordan Love has been a different quarterback second half of the year. And Tampa Bay, even though they lost pretty embarrassing last week, they're still one of the hottest teams in football. And I figure they deserve some respect here for, being right outside of the top 10. But then we get into the top 10. And Amir, how I want to do this is I'll let you go through your 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, etc., etc. And my team will line up on the left side for where I have them, if that makes sense. For example, here, you have your team at 10, the LA Rams. They stay put. But my team, the LA Rams, of course, they jump up to 8 from number 10. But your thoughts here about the LA Rams?
Yeah, I was looking at my top 10, and nobody dropped out as well. And I'll say this is probably the toughest week, deciding who goes where.
Yes, it
And
is.
I went ahead and kept the Rams at 10 because Kansas City that second half last week played great. Mahomes played great. I mean, this Eagles team has been depleting, but I still don't think that the Rams are at that level with them just yet. But I have them at 10. They're in my opinion the hottest team of football, going to be the most dangerous team.
Yes.
Underdog coming into the playoffs. So I just left them at 10.
To be honest with you, just with how all the other top contenders have looked recently, teams that are in our 6 and 7 spots, I was contemplating moving this team into the top 5. Just
Yeah.
because I know how dangerous they could become playoff time. Regardless, who is your number 9 team?
So my number 9 team is Kansas City. I mean, they've been underperforming a lot. I mean, the one thing I would say is that there's not much difference between Team 3 to Team 10. I mean, I feel like all those teams can compete, which is rare that and crazy this year. But I got Kansas City at 9. I mean, the defense is still good. The problems are on offense, but I think they kind of showed enough last week to have somewhat bit of hope, going into the playoffs. I left them at 9.
Yeah, they have Patrick Mahomes. That's the only argument you need. At number
Exactly.
8, you have the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that me and you have both had as our favorite coming out as our Super Bowl teams for a long time now. I want to say at least 2 months. But you have them here at 8. What are your quick thoughts as they both dropped 3 spots for the both of us?
I mean, the worst pass defense in the league. This team is struggling. I mean, they've been struggling the past 5 weeks, and I try to give them the benefit of the doubt, but at this point, I got to bump them down.
Yeah, I
I have to.
think, and we'll talk about it later, but I really, I might as well bring it up. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. I think realistically, when we talk about our Super Bowl favorites, they have a very good, favorable path. I'll say that to get back to that Final
Yeah.
Four in the conference title round, but we'll talk about that, of course, in a minute. At number 7, you have the Lions. I have them at 9. This might be the first time in the history of your existence
Mhm.
on this podcast you've had them higher than me. But number 7, Detroit Lions. Controversial end to their last week's game, but your thoughts here on the Lions?
Yeah, I mean, I see Lions fans, I see people that, favor the Lions, taking their side. But in reality, I mean, the Lions did not play good. I mean, Jared Goff struggled. Dak Prescott almost threw for 400 yards. You had CeeDee Lamb, have his career high, 230 receiving yards and franchise record. And,
Yeah.
looking at this Lions team this past week, it made everyone realize even more that, you know, Jared Goff inconsistency is hindering this team. I mean, like, there's no
Yeah.
reason why they should be throwing 3 interceptions. The Cowboys helped the Lions even have a chance. I mean, they turned the ball over in the red zone twice,
Yeah.
and it helped them out. And for that reason, I kept them at 7.
Yeah. I mean, they're, again, top 10 team. And like you pointed out just a moment ago, it's 1, 2, and everybody else. So I'm
Yeah.
not going to fight too much about these spots. At number 6, you have the Dolphins after their loss last week. I have them at 7. I guess your thoughts here after getting dismantled by about 40 points from the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I mean the Dolphins only have one win. Against a team that's above 500 this season so far. And that was against Dallas, another team who also struggles against great competition. And I'm leaving the Dolphins at 6. I mean, because there's no reason why you should be getting blown out by 40 against any team, especially if you're labeled as contenders. There's no reason why.
Absolutely. And Amir, I'm going to ask you this. We've mentioned it a couple times. Who are the best 2 teams in football, and where do you have them ranked at number 1 and 2?
The Ravens and the Niners, and
The
it's not
Ravens and the
close after
Niners,
that.
of course. In that
Yeah.
order, these teams played. They're the best 2 teams, 2 teams that have clinched the number 1 seeds. So they're probably going to remain that way, at least going into next week, or at least going into the divisional round of the playoffs. But at number 5, who is your number 5 team here? Is again, we have to fill out 3 through 5.
So my number 5 team is Dallas. I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate for people saying, "Oh, the Lions should have technically won that game," but I mean Dallas. Dallas. I kind of have a love-hate relationship for them. I mean, they're so inconsistent, but I mean, like they show flashes of dominance, which it's hard to not put them in the top 5. And I wanted to put them higher, but I was like, I can't because I mean they actually still almost lost last week.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
still
should have.
turning the ball over, still making costly mistakes, which I think come playoff time, if they make those like little mistakes, it'll hurt them.
Well, I kind of spoiled it there, but who's your number 4 team? Is this might be a homer pick, but I don't know. This team might be the scariest and the hottest team in football. Who's your number 4 team?
Flack around and find out. I got the Cleveland Browns at
Flack
4.
around and find
And,
out.
I was gonna put them at 3, but I don't want to seem too biased. But I mean, this team is dangerous. The defense is elite, the best in the league. What's scary about this team is the mantra has always been run the football, but the mantra has flipped. We've been
Yes.
airing the ball out. Flacco's looking elite, but the biggest concern that I have is his interceptions haven't hurt them just yet. But come playoff time, it could really cost them.
Like he
I'm
did
hoping
against
that
the
he kind of
Rams.
tones it down. He becomes less trigger happy at times. That completion percentage can also go up. But I mean, shoot, last week the run game got going, and I believe come playoff time the run game will also notch up even more and make the team even more dangerous.
Yeah, I think even though that we both have, and I'll skip to it here, even though we both have the Buffalo Bills here at number 3, I think the biggest threat to the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC side of things is a divisional opponent. It is the Cleveland
Yeah,
Browns, as we saw, because we beat this team with what? PJ Walker as our quarterback.
exactly.
I think when you have a more experienced, of course, a Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP
Well,
quarterback,
no, I mean, actually, no, we had Deshaun Watson, but Deshaun had a broken shoulder.
even worse. I think
Yeah,
PJ Walker might be better than Watson on a broken shoulder.
yeah,
Whatever the case was, I think we're the biggest threat to Baltimore because I think of course it's always hard to beat a team twice in a single season, especially a divisional opponent. However, I just think with our defense and if we get Joe Flacco to play, he's a veteran. I think he knows when it comes time to when playoffs come around, he needs to protect the ball more than ever. So I'm not worried about Flacco come playoff time. At least as of right now, it could be a different story in 2 weeks. But I think the Browns are definitely the biggest threat to the Baltimore Ravens. But then at number 3, we have the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs has not been there, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But huge game this weekend. They can either win and make the playoffs, and if they win this weekend, they'll be the number 2 seed. But if they lose, there's a possibility they miss the playoffs. A crazy, weekend here for the Buffalo Bills coming up. But as of right now, we have them as a top 3 team in football. Your thoughts on Josh Allen and the crew?
I mean, I have them at top three, but it's not like a solidified top three.
Right.
And up to this point in the season, I mean, they've been inconsistent, obviously, but I think they're going to go into Miami this week, smack them up. I mean, Josh
Yes.
Allen is 10-2 all time against Miami, I'm pretty sure. And I mean, the Dolphins, like I just mentioned, they struggle against good competition. We've been saying that week by week, and the fact that they just lost by 40, I think it'll kind of mess with their confidence. And I expect a big game from Josh Allen this week, and that momentum to carry off into the playoffs.
But that is our top 10. I'm on the left, of course, Amir on the right. But let's, dive a little bit deeper into week 18. First off, we're going to talk about the race for Caleb. And you see the blue box here on the left side of your screen. The Bears have officially clinched that number 1 pick via the Carolina Panthers. So the Bears, of course, they're already on the clock. They have to make that decision here in just a couple months. But then Washington, their 7-game losing streak. Ron Rivera's doing his job on his way out, of course. They jump up to 2. The Patriots have 3, and the Cardinals have 4. So a 3-way tie for the number 2 pick. But of course, due to tiebreakers and strength of schedule, the Washington Commanders have the number 2 pick as of right now. And then, of course, the Giants sneak in there at number 5. But that is the race for Caleb. Let's move over to our Week 17 recap. I was 13-3. You were 11-5. Coincidentally, we only disagreed on 2 games, and that ended up being the difference between the two of us. But then we move over to our season record. And of course, bottom left, you see mine. Bottom right, you see Amir's. I don't think I'm going to be able to hit that 200 mark that I tried to hit, that I was on pace to hit last year. Regardless, I think both of us in a pretty good spot. Basically 70% and 66, 67%. So again, I think we know a little bit what we're talking about. I'll stop yapping here, and Amir, if you want to talk about any of these games on the screen, I'll let you do so. However, you see these green boxes. And Amir, we used that website just a few weeks ago to do our playoff predictions. I went in and I typed in our predictions that are on the screen now. And due to, what we typed in, so if our predictions come 100% true, this is what would happen. The Texans in a win would get the 7th seed. The Jags would get the 4 seed. The Lions would get the 3 seed, and the Bucks would get the 4 seed. But Amir, I'll give you the floor here if you want to talk about any of these games.
The one game I want to mention is this Jets and New England game. And I'm kind of picking these games because I have to come back to beat you, I should say. And I thought this was the game I could kind of attack. I'm not confident about this game. I'm kind of curious to see what New England is going to do. Going into New York, or
They should lose.
playing against New York. I'm kind of curious to see if they'll purposely tank to try to get that number 2 pick or whatever. Or if this Jets team is going to come out hot and and smack them. I'm kind of just curious to see what's going to happen.
I just think it's Bill Belichick, and he probably doesn't even care about that top
Yeah,
pick.
exactly.
So they'll be fine with drafting Drake May wherever they get him. And then we move over to the 4 o'clock games, and of course the Sunday night game. No Thursday game this weekend, so no game tonight, and of course no Monday night game, as that is saved for wild card weekend. But then the Packers, in our predictions, would get the 7 seed. They'd sneak in there after that late season push. The Cowboys with a win get the number 2 seed. The Eagles, by the Cowboys win, would get the number 5 seed. The Rams are locked in at 6. The Chiefs are locked in at 3. And of course, big game here. Winner of this game gets the number 2 seed for Sunday night. That is why it's Sunday night. But if the Bills win, like we're predicting, they get the number 2 seed. And if they lose, I think they, with a lot of things happening, there's a chance they miss the playoffs. But regardless, that is how our playoffs line up in the AFC and NFC. Your thoughts here about any of these games?
I think Buffalo's going to smack Miami up. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, this Dolphins team, they look scary, but come playoff time, I think Buffalo's on a whole nother level. Experience wise, coaching wise, I think they're on a whole nother level. But I mean, that's really it. I mean, to be honest, I say Philly's going to show up when it matters most as well.
Yes, I think we'll talk about that here in a moment as well. But I do want to point this out in case you're wondering at home or in case you're thinking we're stupid. For the LA Rams and San Fran game, San Fran is locked up the #1 seed. It's going to be Sam Darnold and a bunch of backups going into this
Yeah.
weekend. So Juwan Jennings is going to be the #1 option, I'm assuming, right? Unless this team, for some reason, plays their stars. So for that reason, we went with the LA Rams, and especially for the Saturday games with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens, same case there. Baltimore's going to rest their guys, and Pittsburgh's in a situation where they have to win to make the playoffs. So they're going to be playing all out. And I think for those two reasons, we have the, I guess, quote unquote, upset there in those games. But then we dive into, of course, one of the favorite screens here. And I hate to admit it, but it was your idea. We're going to talk about this, though. The Arizona Cardinals, we both have as the upset of the week over the Seattle Seahawks. And honestly, Amir, you were talking about catching up there with me. If you'd like, I can switch my team to the Arizona Cardinals because I actually believe this is a game where they're going to win. So, a matter of fact, I might actually change it here on air. I'll go with the Arizona Cardinals in a game where they should lose and the Seahawks should win, but I'll go with Kyler Murray to spoil some playoff hopes. But your thoughts here about the Cardinals over the Seattle Seahawks?
I mean, a team, you know, week 18 enjoys spoiling playoff hopes, especially a divisional opponent. And,
Yes.
I think, this is the week Kyler Murray and this, team that's now competitive with him at quarterback, can do it. I mean, the reason why I chose Seattle, because, I mean, Seattle's obviously better. And, I mean, they're playing, for playoff hopes as well. But one thing I would say, the inconsistencies of, DK and Tyler Lockett is going to catch up to them. And I think that this game is going to be a 4-quarter game.
Absolutely. So, do you want to change it all or do you want to stick with Seattle in that matchup?
I'm going to stick with it.
Okay, stick with it there. Then we're going to talk about your hot take and my player of the week because they go together. And I'm just going to let you talk for me here because you mentioned it twice now. What is your hot take on the week? And I guess I'll let you dive into my player of the week as well.
So my hot take is that the Bills are going to put up 40 points on Miami. Especially Bradley Chubb being out, done for the season. I think Xavier Howard also might not play. And, the fact that Stephon Diggs, earlier in the year, ate Jalen Ramsey's lunch. I hate saying that because he's my favorite corner in the league. I think Buffalo's going to dominate them. They're going to score the ball. Pretty much move the ball at ease. And I was going to go with Stephon Diggs as my player of the week, but you chose him, and so I had to switch it up.
Yeah, I do have the luxury of filling this stuff in before you. So, of course, I had to get mine in there beforehand. But I think Stephon Diggs, I think, what is it, 9 or 10 straight games without 100 yards? This is the
Yeah.
perfect week where he can bounce back, primetime game when they need him most against a team that, even if they don't have Jalen Waddle, they can put up a lot of points. So, Stephon Diggs, I think, is going to have a big game here. Of course, he hasn't had one with the new offensive coordinator. But your player of the week is a guy that's in a winning get in situation in a divisional matchup, and we both have him winning this weekend. What are your thoughts here on Mr. CJ Stroud, #2 pick?
Yeah, so CJ Stroud, in my opinion, is in a perfect position. He's playing against a close defense who has struggled to stop people at times. And I think for CJ Stroud, I mean, I think he's that guy. I think he has that mindset where it's like, kind of that it factor. Similar to Mahomes. You can go ahead and teach guys X's and O's, teach them how to read coverages, make certain throws, but you can't teach that it factor.
Right.
And I think he's going to go and dominate this week. Have an amazing game. Pretty much get into the playoffs.
Absolutely. But then we go over to my hot take on the week. And I think, I'm doing this strictly because we are in the media. Amir, technically you are as well. So I think I'm going to say this for selfishly for me and you. I'm going to say Justin Fields has a bad week in Chicago, and I think Green Bay is going to blow them out. And this is a Chicago team that's been hot, and we know the fans want Justin Fields. But I'm going to say Green Bay not only wins this game, but Justin Fields has a terrible game. And I think it's going to add even more questions and more stories for this offseason for the both of us to discuss about which quarterback should they go with, what direction should they go with. So I'm going to go with Justin Fields as a bad week, and I mean a bad week. And Green Bay is going to blow them out on the route to the playoffs. But that could be also completely wrong. But that's why it's a hot take. Then we talk about our Super Bowl favorites, and I'll let you start here. Why do you have San Fran as your Super Bowl favorite?
So I switched it up, and I was kind of going back and thinking about it. I'm like, San Fran honestly, has a smooth ride to the playoffs.
They do.
I think them being the 1 seed, securing that first round bye, being able to rest, your guy McCaffrey this week and next week. I think being able to rest these guys, being able to go into the playoffs at home is going to be great for them. The fact that they only lost by 14 despite turning the ball over 5 times against Baltimore. I think that kind of says a lot. to where it's like, come playoff time, I think they're going to be a lot smarter with the football. They're going to be even more dominant. And I think, they're going to go all the way, make it. It'll probably be San Fran versus Baltimore, in my opinion. And, I think that, with the experience that they have on that roster, I don't see this team turning the ball over 5 times. I think it's going to be closer, and I'm taking them winning it all.
Absolutely. And I guess this is a good time to mention where I probably, well, I'm not going to go back, but according to our predictions, so if our predictions are 100% true, in the AFC side of things, the Ravens, of course, have the number one seed, but then the Bills would be at the two seed, and they would be playing, oh, I forgot, they would be playing the Houston Texans. So it's going to be the Bills, Texans, the three seed would be the Chiefs and the Dolphins, rematch of the Germany game. And then the 4-5 would be Jacksonville and the Cleveland Browns. So that is our AFC playoffs. Again, if everything goes 100% right. And then in the NFC side of things, which is where our Super Bowl contenders lie, the number one seed, the San Francisco 49ers, like you mentioned, they get much needed rest for all of their star players. But then the two seed is going to be, if I'm not mistaken, the Dallas Cowboys. And they will get matched up with the Green Bay Packers. Of course, some history there with Aaron Rodgers and also coming up big in taking out the playoff lives of Cowboy fans. The 3-6 matchup is very interesting. We have the Lions and the Detroit. We have the Detroit Lions and the LA Rams rematch there with Jared Goff and his former team. And then the 4-5 matchup in the NFC is going to be the Eagles and the Tampa Bay Bucks. I say all of that to focus in on this NFC side of things because Tampa Bay, they just showed the world basically that they're good. But if you play well against them and you force Baker Mayfield to make some ill-advised throws, you can beat them pretty easily. And I think that's what Philly can do. I think Philly's going to take care of business against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Okay. And then, realistically being the 5 seed, you would think, okay, they're going to go on to play the San Francisco 49ers. However, I think me and you would both agree that as of right now, we would take the LA Rams over the Detroit Lions. That would lead to a San Francisco LA Rams second round matchup, then a Dallas Cowboy and Philadelphia second round matchup. It's a divisional matchup. You know that team best, and you've split them this season. I think I would take Philly in that matchup, and then it goes down to the final four. You just have to beat San Fran. If you beat San Fran, I think Philly can beat anybody coming out of the AFC side of things, and that might be a hot take. But I think basically what I'm saying here is if they're going to get hot, these are the perfect couple weeks to do so and gain big amounts of confidence in big time games. So just given their playoff route, and long-winded, but given their playoff route, I'm going to take them to come out of the NFC side of things as the Niners would have to go through the LA Rams to get there. Of course, they have an extra week of rest. Whatever. That's just where I'm going to go there. Of course, I'm also stubborn and I don't want to change my pick. But Amir, that is going to do it here for today's podcast. Of course, we're back to just 2 episodes a week with fantasy football behind us. But Amir, any last thoughts here? It was a great episode, fun episode. Next week we have the playoffs. So any last thoughts before we get out of here?
I'm excited for the playoffs. I'm excited, but I'm also hurt because I don't want the season to end. But
Yes.
Playoffs is something you can't replace. So I'm excited.
Yeah, the best football is ahead of us, and again, it's limited football, but it is ultimately the best games we'll watch all season, or at least we would hope so. Hopefully, we don't get a lot of blowouts. But we'll be back next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we might have a co-host, we might not. But next Tuesday, we're going to be going through midseason grades for every NBA team to this point in the year. It should be tons of fun. And then next Thursday, of course, we have the wild card round predictions and very special power rankings, as we're going to be ranking all 14 teams in the NFL playoffs. But that is going to do it. We'll see you guys next week. Good luck to your team this weekend, unless you're a who are the Browns playing again? I'm drawing a blank here. Unless you're a Bengals fan, good luck to every other team this weekend. And until next week, stay happy, stay healthy, get out of here.